Oh, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News with Big Hairy Pat. And that's about it for now. Hi. We don't even have Nala tonight, guys. Even she's fucked off and gone, no, I don't think I'll hang out with you guys tonight. I think I'll do my own thing. How are you all? Thanks for joining us. Happy to be with you. I'm going to start tonight's show with a bit of a slightly different vibe. If you were with us last night, then you will know that we had some problems with the audio. So, as unprofessional as this sounds, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make sure the audio is working before we get into it. So, for you guys who are watching right now, who are already in the chat, just let me know. Can you hear this?
Christopher Luxon spent the day making Big Macs at his.
That's all I'm going to play because I'll play the actual story later on.
Christopher Luxon spent the day making Big Macs.
Tell me if you can hear it, and make sure that it's not repeating, like because sometimes it doubles back on itself if it doesn't work. So, did you hear that audio I just played? Yes or no? And if you did, then we're golden. Roger, yes, Roger. Good. Now, there's one other thing as well, because we have a fantastic pre-recorded interview tonight, because I've set up things slightly differently. I just want to make sure that this works as well. Tell me if you can hear this. Co-leader of Te Pāti Maori, Ngawera Packer, joins us. Can you hear that? That's part two. And tell me, like, yes, can hear the interview or something, so I know it's different from the previous yeses. I just want to make sure it's all working before we get into it. More yeses coming out, more yeses coming out. That's good. Rob, that was yes to the yes again. Good. Okay. Whew. And it was one of those things where, unfortunately, because the Chewmeister, the reason we're at 60 seconds later than normal is actually Chewie just jumped on. Lovely man that he is. Just jumped on to say g'day and see if we need help. And he was like, "Oh, I'm going to help you tonight." And I'm just like, "Dude, we're sweet. We're sorted, brother. We're sorted. You go get better. So if you weren't with us last night, Chewie's called himself the dirty C word, and I expect we'll probably see him next week. I don't know. He popped in tonight to say hello. Maybe we'll see him tomorrow night, but there's no pressure. I just said to him, dude, you're welcome to come on and have a chat if you want, but you are not needed. You are easily replaceable with nothing, Chewie. That's what I said to him, because that's how I truly feel deep in my soul, that he's easily replaceable with not a thing. How are you all? You doing well? Tonight's going to be fun. We've got a Ngawera Packer coming up, as you've just seen. Select committee received today, and I'll bring this up for you so you can see it. Select committee has accepted the petition to officially. Mike, sorry, Chewie. Sorry, Chewie. Hurtful. LOL. Sorry, Chewie. Te Pāti Māori, who are driving the petition to officially change the name of New Zealand to Aotearoa, has had the petition accepted by Select Committee. But what does that mean? I was excited to get a hold of Debbie. She jumped on. We had a chat for 20 minutes, and we go through the whole thing, because I've probably tried a couple of times. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Chewie, that I said those harsh things, because now Chewie's getting hassled by other people. Is that your feelings? You know it to be true. So we haven't actually talked about it really yet to anyone involved in the petition. So I kind of take a step backwards and start from the beginning and go, why? And we go through that whole thing and then talk about, if it was to change, how it was to change, why it should change. Oh, it's a really interesting conversation. If you are a patron, you've had access to this for about the past hour, because it's uploaded on patreon.com/Big Hairy News. The interview's already there. If you're not a patron, you'll see it tonight. And then after the show, it'll be uploaded live to YouTube as well, if you want to share it around. Because it's really interesting to hear the perspective of one of the leaders of the Maori Party talking about why the Maori Party thinks this should be a change. Should it be a change that is only about, should it officially be New Zealand Aotearoa, or Aotearoa New Zealand, or should it just be Aotearoa and New Zealand goes away? That's the conversation we have. So that'll be coming up as well. Also, we are going to be talking about Christopher Luxon, apparently today applied for a new job. He said with his tongue in his cheek. But I also want to show you a little thing that I noticed today, which was right-wing commentators, bloggers, etc., how what ideologues they are. I mean, I know you've heard me say this before, but I think there is a difference between intelligent debate and ideology. Ideology means you always side with your political perspective no matter what, And I think we all know, if we take a step backwards, forget politics, we all know if we take a step backwards that you can't be right 100% of the time. It's literally impossible. Sometimes we're going to be wrong. That means sometimes policies are going to be wrong. That means sometimes your side is going to be wrong. So ideologues, or you call them zealots as well, they always side with their party or their perspective rather than with the issue. So intelligent debate, in my opinion, is playing each ball on its merits. Because sometimes, if you're sitting on the left are going to be wrong. Sometimes if you're sitting on the right's going to be wrong. And vice versa. Sometimes if you're sitting on the left, the right's going to be correct. And sometimes if you're sitting on the right, the left's going to be correct. I've got a really clinical example here of a right-wing pundit just proving themselves to be an ideologue and nothing else. Right, we'll get to that today as well, along with the conversation. And finally, do you know what the saying is? I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound patronizing, for most people do. Hoisted by one's own petard means. I didn't probably learn about what the actual origins of that meaning were until maybe 10 years ago. A petard is an explosive device. It's actually a bomb. Being hoisted by one's own petard is when there was an era where I'm assuming maybe it's not medieval, maybe it's after that, but when people used to carry bombs to try and take out the enemy, right? And they'd carry these bombs, is that they'd take these bombs and they'd like put them to break into places, but sometimes those bombs would go off and the people carrying them would get blown up by them. They'd be hoisted by their own petard. Right. So I have a fantastic example of that for you tonight. Some of you may have seen it. It's from a couple of days ago, where the National Party tries a setup/gotcha question to the Labour Party in the House, and it completely backfires. In fact, it gives the Labour Party a chance to sit there for 2, 3, 4 minutes, espousing all their virtuous successes from the last 5 years. Now, if you're not a fan of the Labour Party, you'll probably go, there's no successes. But whether you agree or disagree with the Labour Party's claimed successes, the question, which was supposed to take them down a peg or two, gave them an opportunity to grandstand. It's hilariously classical. That'll be coming up as well. I've been told that's not what an ideologue is. Someone dogmatically committed to ideological positions, not a party stooge who would just go with the party line. Sure. Sure. I think an ideologue or someone who adheres to an ideology or a zealot will never turn away from it. That's how I'm using the term. Dictionary definition may not be exactly that, but that's what we're doing. Okay, let's have a look at this story with Mr. Luxon, and hopefully, because we've tested it once already, it's all up and running and it's working for you. But let's have a look today at the new job that Mr. Luxon has put his hand up for. He says tongue placed firmly in his cheek.
Christopher Luxon spent the day making Big Macs at his old stomping ground in Christchurch, but the timing of the visits turned out to be a golden opportunity for the government to flip the script and grill the National Party leader over low-paid workers. Here's senior political reporter Benedict Collins.
Hi, welcome to McDonald's. It's Chris Luxon. Can I take your order, please?
Back where it all began, flippin' burgers.
Oh, yes, sorry, yes.
Manning the drive-through.
Drive on through when you can. Oh.
And offering service with a smile.
Thank you so much. Was that your burger? Oh, that's my burger. Oh, thank you very much. There you go.
He didn't just run an airline, in case you didn't know. He started out at Merivale McDonald's in Christchurch.
It was a mixed performance, I would have thought. I'm not sure I would have hired me based off that performance this morning.
Well, I can understand why Mr. Luxon's keeping his career options open.
I mean, Grant Robertson, a tongue-in-cheek joke, not particularly clever. There is more criticism to come, which is sort of cleverer, but Grant's being a bit of a mean girl and having a bit of a swipe. Yeah, so be it. It's not particularly clever, not particularly funny, but all right, on we go.
So is this a good backup for after the election next year?
No, look, we're putting all our eggs in one basket, which is to win next year.
Mr. Luxon's field trip to Macca's, delicious timing for the government.
Vote for it!
Just yesterday, National voted against fair pay agreements aimed at lifting the incomes of low and middle income earners like McDonald's workers.
Was he surprised to see the Leader of the Opposition join them this morning?
Mr. Speaker, yes, I can confirm that I actually met with a number of McDonald's workers last night who were extremely pleased about the passing of the Fair Pay Agreements legislation. These are workers who do important work within our society. It is only decent and fair that they receive a fair go. We believe that those workers should receive fair pay for their work, and we believe that's more important than an $18,000 tax cut for the Leader of the Opposition.
National's deputy insisting they want higher wages for those workers too.
National shares that goal, but the way to deliver that is with strong management of the economy.
Both sides clearly dining out on today's visit to the Golden Arches. Benedict Collins, One News.
Thank you, Benedict. We appreciate your insights there. So to have a look over on News Hub, they spell out a bit more about some of the criticism that Mr. Luxon came under today. Same story, same imagery, yada, yada, yada. Says this, but Luxon came under fire for the move as only on Wednesday did National oppose the government's Fair Pay Agreement legislation. Under the legislation, which passed its final reading this week, sector-wide agreements will be negotiated if 1,000 workers in an industry or 10% of the workforce demand one. The agreements can be set out minimum entitlements for workers like pay, overtime rates, and leave. The National Party has promised to repeal the legislation if it enters the government next year, concerned that it gives unions too much power. So let's just have a look again, right? This is the new legislation, and pardon me for my misreading there. For some reason tonight, my dyslexia is kicking in. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe it's because I'm feeling so bad about mocking Chewy so violently. Under the legislation, sector-wide agreements will be negotiated if 1,000 workers in an industry or 10% of the workforce demand one. So agreements will be negotiated if there is that demand. The agreements can set out minimum entitlements for workers like pay, overtime rates, and leave. Now, it also does say here that agreements will be negotiated if these workers want to. It doesn't necessarily say that they will be guaranteed to be enforced. So the National Party has promised to repeal the legislation that says if a huge portion of your workforce wants to go to an agreement, try to negotiate a new agreement, they're not going to let you. So that's what the National Party is saying, to be clear. A McDonald's worker told News Hub on Wednesday that the legislation will mean workers like him get, quote, fair working conditions, end quote, and that the, quote, industry in this current state isn't working, end quote. Luxon, however, said the current arrangements have served us well. Interesting, eh? Have served us well. I wonder who the us is in that conversation. I wonder who. I think the Labour Party has missed a bit of a trick these few months, because quite a while ago, not quite a while ago, there was a report by CEOs that kind of was critical of the Labour Party. Labour Party, if you're listening, you're welcome to use this. Well, the report came out that CEOs were not a fan of Labour. My opinion at that time was, yeah, okay, Labour, you should own that. Because where Labour has come from a place that was supporting the workers. As soon as the CEOs came out saying, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, that they weren't that much of a fan of Labour and the Labour leadership and what's going on, Labour should have said, okay, we'll let National worry about the CEO guys at the top, and we'll stay on the factory floor. We'll look after the workers, right? National, you can have the CEOs. We'll look after the people who need the help. You can look after the boardroom. Fine. They didn't do it, and I'm disappointed they didn't do it, because when Mr. Luxon says in this article, it's working well for us, or what was the exact quote here? The current arrangements have served us well. I would propose the us are the people at the top. In other words, the owner of the McDonald's in the local area, not necessarily the worker at the, call it a fry station. I never worked at a fast food joint, the fry station. So I think it's another opportunity for Labour to kind of somewhat go back to their roots and say, yes, we will be a party. We'll be a party of the workers. You can be a party of the boardroom. I think it's a really strong message as well, and it could be a real line of demarcation between the two parties. Anyway, Workplace Relations Minister Michael Wood on Thursday said it was, quote, ironic and, quote, hypocritical for Luxon to be working at a McDonald's store just a day after they voted against the legislation. I think his comments and the comments of the National Party show how totally out of touch they are, Wood said. Every measure that we put forward to try and make things a little bit better and easier for the lowest paid New Zealanders, they oppose. So one step further, Mr. Wood, all you need to do is then say, we are for the factory workers. We are for the people serving us in the fast food. Well, that's our voter base, because that used to be Labour's voter base, right? That's where they should actually use this and get in there and reset that messaging. Michael Woods goes on to say, I would just hope that if he did, he actually had an open conversation with some of the low wage and minimum wage workers, that he continually opposes getting better pay and conditions. I think it's really interesting, actually, that he, I wonder if there were any conversations. I think it can be quite intimidating, I would think, for someone on minimum wage, making burgers and serving people, to have, the person standing next to you on a PR photo shoot, who could be the next prime minister, to actually bail them up in the corner. So I understand why possibly that didn't happen. Now, flipping this on to the next part of the conversation around the PR photo shoot. It's exactly what it is, right? National's gone in there thinking, we're going to do this, and part of the writings I've read talk about Christopher Luxon wanting to, kind of put the message out there for young people that working is really important. A job gives you a sense of purpose and it gives you value, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's unfortunately doing it at a time where our unemployment is the lowest in the OECD. It's 3.2%. One of the reasons we have inflation is because the inflation that it is because the Reserve Bank projected us to have more people unemployed in this current climate, and we've got fewer. Now that means the economy is stronger than they thought, and it's a flow on to one of the reasons that, because they set their targets for more unemployed people. There are fewer unemployed people, very, very low, 3.2%, I think it is. And so you're kind of saying to people, go out and get a job, it's great. And most people do. There's one other thing I wanted to share about this, and this is a tweet from the lovely Cam Slater. And you guys know Cam Slater when he used to be relevant. His name was Whale Oil, not so much anymore. But he's still kind of banging that drum. He's still got a site that people upload to. It's not Whale Oil anymore. And he put out this tweet earlier in the week. He put out the tweet about the Prime Minister flying to Antarctica, saying everything is a PR opportunity, meaning the Prime Minister in the plane reading a book, her team is using this just as a publicity stunt and nothing else. So you go, okay, that's interesting, isn't it? How about some consistency here? I wonder what he said about the publicity stunt that Mr. Luxon did today. What did he say about the publicity stunt that Mr. Luxon did today? His response was, can't wait to see Ardern back wrapping fish and chips in Morrinsville. So that's what I was calling an ideologue. Some people disagree with him with saying a zealot, someone who can't play each ball on its merits. Did I even show you those texts? I don't know if I did. Did I show you those texts or not? Because the texts aren't up there and I didn't realize I closed them. Did I show you that? Anyway, so there's, if I didn't show you that, I'm showing it to you now. So everything is a PR opportunity about the Prime Minister flying down, and it makes you think, okay, so yes, I don't know if it's necessarily a PR opportunity, but I actually agree with Cam Slater. Everything in politics is a PR opportunity. So when Christopher Luxon is a PR opportunity, Cam Slater still talks about a negative towards Jacinda Ardern. So it's the ideological skirt showing, the petticoat. You understand your petticoat showing, Mr. Slater? So I just thought that was an interesting little observation that someone who was to think, when the Prime Minister's in front of the camera, it's always her people trying to get good press. But when Mr. Luxon's in front of a camera, literally doing a PR stunt, like it's the literal definition of a PR stunt, the response from Mr. Slater is to talk about Jacinda better get back to her job when she was a student, working in the fish and chip shop. I think Chewy also said on one of his tweets today, I was just talking to him about it before I came on, that one of the points that Chewy made, to give credit where credit's due, is how people kind of have criticised Jacinda Ardern for working in a fish and chip shop, local fish and chip shop in Morrinsville, and kind of saying, what are you using that for? It's not really anything you can add to your CV. It doesn't make you the everyman. But then you've got the leader of the opposition who worked for a literal Fortune 500 company, and now people all over New Zealand, from a certain political perspective, are trying to use this to show how he is an everyman. It's just bizarre. That's the ideological thing that I really hate and think is really unintelligent and really not smart. Now, let me say again, and you'll appreciate this from last night if you're with us, when there's only one person operating like there is at the moment, we sometimes are unable to get to the text as much as we would like, because I am the only co-leader of Te Pāti Māori, Debbie. Stop. Sorry about that. I was loading something up while I was talking to you, because there's only one person. I do sometimes harder to get to the texts because I'm looking at other screens and loading up other things while people are texting away. So I'm going to go and have a look through a few of them. You know what I'll do? I'll get to Debbie Ngawera Packer and we'll play that. And then when I come back, I'll go through the text messages while we're playing the conversation with Debbie, and we'll reference some of the conversations that you guys are having now about the Christopher Luxon McDonald's PR stunt after this conversation, because it'll give me a chance to go through them. All right, so let's move on, shall we? I would normally stop here and go to some of the messages, but I haven't had a chance to look at any of them yet. So we'll jump forwards and come backwards, and that's what we'll do. As I said at the start of the show, there was a petition by the Maori Party to change the name of New Zealand to Aotearoa. Today, Select Committee I don't know if they've agreed, but they've accepted the petition. What happens now is it goes through Select Committee, and how does it become law? Well, I won't say now because we talk about that in the conversation. But because the Maori Party were the spearheads, I also noticed, and this hasn't come up in the conversation, that James Shaw from the Greens has come out saying he supports the name being changed to Aotearoa as well. Whilst we're doing this, I'd be happy to hear your comments in the chat about what you think about a name change to Aotearoa. I'll give you my thoughts about it at the very end after we have the conversation. But so we got a chance to get Debbie for 15-20 minutes or so, talk about the petition, talk about why, and talk about where it goes from here. So let's just rip into this. Hopefully the audio will all work and I won't have any problems with it like I did last night. But here is Debbie Ngawera Packer talking to me this afternoon on the petition and the now Select Committee idea, well, certainly submissions to be taken in shortly, about changing the name of New Zealand to Aotearoa. Co-leader of Te Pāti Māori, Debbie Ngawera Packer, joins us. Good evening to you, Debbie. Thanks for giving us some time.
Kia ora, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I read in the news in the last 24 hours that Select Committee have received, and I believe they have said have accepted the petition to change the name of New Zealand to Aotearoa. I think I've wanted to talk about this a couple of times when it's come up in the news, so thank you for giving us some time today to have a bit of a chat about it. I guess I want to kind of take a step backwards and ask about it. I'm looking at, I think, Parliamentary Services page as I speak to you, and the petition request was, quote, that the House of Representatives change the country's official name to Aotearoa and begin a process to identify and officially restore the Te Reo Māori names for all towns, cities and places by 2026. And note that 70,047 people have signed petitions to that effect. So that's all accurately now what we're discussing?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I forgot about that other 47. I need to amend my socials because I said 20,000. So
those 47
and a
don't
time,
matter.
by the way, too. So yeah.
I guess the first question was, I believe you need 200,000 signatures to force a referendum. Did you ever think about going down that path and kind of trying to get to that mark and then force a public referendum?
I guess the issue that we have often as tangata whenua, who are sadly also a minority in their own country, is that we often will come up against the majority who are not trying to get their language and their culture reinvigorated or even their narrative remembered. So it becomes again, really hard, because the very process that took our language and our names out is the process that we appeal to in referendums. So it doesn't work for us. And I think that's why we decided to be really bold and put it out there and to sort of see will it get air, will it get flight?
I can see that there must be something quite disheartening about having to rely on allies to a cause to get that cause through, rather than the people who want to do it themselves. Because what you're saying is true. If you probably need to rely on people outside maybe the group that this would most impact to then help you get it over the line. So I get it. I can completely see why you do that.
And it's often a younger generation too. So, to be able to put in corrective measures over things that would, effectively say the culture that we've applied and been living to as a nation for generations has been wrong, is a tough call. Where a younger generation, there's a lot more savviness about, how we all got here, the impacts of colonization on Indigenous peoples throughout the world. So it's not such a personal hit for the next generations. They're not as tied to, I guess, that type of regime or mentality. It's not like you're losing something. So these are a real crossroads, I think, as a nation that comes with this type of discussion as well. So we've had feedback. I got one this morning. It's just like, why do we have to keep having, and they actually spelled it, your Maori, M-A-A-R-I, move on. It's, it's not something that's going to help us, grow the economy or get kids jobs, and thinking, well, actually, that's why we lost it in the first place. And that's actually not what we're out to do. We're actually just trying to rebalance our nationhood, our identity as a nation as well.
And look, the stupid part about that argument back that's been thrown at you is a lot of people are saying to Maori, but no matter what the group were, they're saying to the group that's been wronged, it's time for you to move on. Whereas the position is always actually it's the wronged people that kind of go, okay, we're okay now to move on. Whereas if you flip that any other way to those people, if they had been wronged, and then you were to say to them, well, because you've been wronged, we're going to move on. It doesn't work that way. So for people to say that, they're either not thinking or they're choosing ignorance.
That's right. And I think also it's not about enforcing a deficit mentality. I think the reason why we tied it up with actually bringing other names to life in the regions, using perhaps the traditional names or cultural names, is because often those were named after sites of significance or tied into history that was, was about the shaping of those communities physically and spiritually. And I think there's such a lot to be gained in that as well. So we saw the curriculum push, and Te Aotearoa Flavour was a large part of getting our own history as Indigenous peoples into our education system. So that was the aspect about it as well, is that, and we put a date. So I think some of the anti is like, oh, we don't want to do that. Now, actually, we put a date to transition to, and that's up for discussion. But we put a pole in the ground to sort of say, well, let's move there. And you'll see me do that a lot. I'll say this, but let's move from dislodging our the monarchy as the head of state. Let's move into having this, and none of it is like now. It's like, let's just move as a nation and have that wider discussion and know these aspirations from us as their tangata whenua to go there. So I keep saying this because I see it every day. It's not a matter of if, it will be a matter of when. And it's a real privilege to be able to front and champion that type of change.
Because I mean, when you say that's a matter of when, I do think about sort of natural attrition. I was talking just the other day to someone about Mount Egmont, and no one calls it Mount Egmont anymore. We all call it Mount Taranaki.
One or two.
I live
under the Maunga. Yeah, I live under Mount Taranaki, and but you're right. And I remember the heat in the debate, even within our own whānau and communities. There was just such heat because there was a sense. I kept trying to understand it, and I often like to place myself in another person's shoes. Yep. And it wasn't because they actually hated Taranaki. They actually hated that it implied that they'd been raised or were ill-informed or uneducated or disconnected. And how do you say that to people who went to war for our community, who stood in council positions, the whole lot of civic, community voluntary work? And it is. Like, I so get it, but the other side of it is to, again, to reset and rebalance isn't meant to make anyone feel bereft. But it is so personal because I actually take it as, well, I've not been educated. No, I have been. I've fought for this country. And so there was huge heat. The Daily News was really provocative at first and then sort of slowly came around. And you're right. I think in the last 10 years more so, I've never seen Mount Egmont 1 or 2. But, prior to that, I think it was, you'd see it all the time. But it's never been debated now. It happened.
Yeah, but
And,
that's the thing that I'm now wondering out loud. The thing I'm wondering out loud is the difference between legislative change versus natural attrition and kind of societal shift. I mean, most of us say Aotearoa New Zealand now. I mean, I refer to Dunedin as Oti half the time, and half the time it's Dunedin. And it seems to be a natural transition. Every time the Prime Minister seems to speak, she says Aotearoa New Zealand. And I'm interested in the and it's not I'm not asking this, in other words, saying that it shouldn't be legislatively changed. But I'm wondering about the thought process to drive down this path of legislatively changing things, when it seems to me also that there is this natural progression towards incorporating Māori within everyday language, and maybe finding some kind of, I was going to say pidgin English, maybe it's pidgin Māori, maybe it's pidgin Kiwi or something that uses both languages in a way that are interchangeable at times. So what was the thought process behind the need to drive this to select committee to actually look for a ruling, shall we say, rather than follow the path that society seems to be going down already?
Yeah, I think first of all, it was done off the anniversary of Te Reo Māori and the official realisation of Te Reo Māori and the petition. So it's almost over a year old in our thinking and the way we moved. It was a natural extension of the fact, like, where have we come in the times now that we've been able to, I think it was 1972, and get a petition out and have everything. Are we still committed? Is our reo still thriving? Are our kids grown up familiar and strong? And the reality is that we hadn't done enough, and we needed to continue to push and spearhead off the work that had been done with a lot of our forefathers, Hana Jackson, Hana Te Himara, a lot of those that we just recently celebrated. And I think Tamatoa's mahi, Te Pumo Te Reo. And what we could see is that actually we need to do more. And while we've got this sphere of influence with us, small too, but loud, it seemed the right time and the right place. And, I guess the other side of it is that we couldn't see that there was going to be a real drive in this space. And I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot of bouncing around about our reo and partnerships and te tiriti, and the house that makes the laws of the land needs to show its commitment. And so that was the other sphere as well. So it was a natural extension of work that had been done. Are we there yet? No. Can we do more? Yes. Is the sphere and the platform of influence that we see coming out of the House of Parliament strong enough? Is it certain enough? No. So that's sort of why we went through this, I guess, means of wānanga. And again, we tested it because we kept thinking, well, perhaps it's important for us, but is it important enough? And I can't remember the hours, sorry, but we got 70,047 signatures in overwhelmingly record time. And I keep remembering, like, we got 50,000 signatures in like 50 hours, maybe just shy of 50 hours, and we were stunned. And again, just looking at some of those who made contact with us, they weren't all tangata whenua. There were a lot of tangata tiriti. They weren't all educationalists. There were a lot of young ones. It was just awesome. And so it was real humbling to be able to bounce an idea, wānanga on it, and just keep growing with it. And there's a whole process. Like, it may not come up until next year. We're still waiting for our members' bills which keep moving. And there's still a whole discussion and debate around it all. But yeah, I think it does. It did get the momentum that sort of validated our wānanga.
A point of clarity, Mr. Speaker. The only thing I'm unclear on that I'd like to understand is this is the official petition being presented to Parliament. Is is the petition calling to make the official name Aotearoa only, or is it calling to add it to New Zealand? So, like, you know how we have 3 official languages of New Zealand? There's English, there's Maori, and there's New Zealand Sign Language. Is the petition calling to have Aotearoa be the only official name, or to be made an official name and it will sit alongside New Zealand?
To be honest, our wānanga was to have it as the official name, which is what we did similarly with Maunga Taranaki as well. But again, even that's been up for discussion. And even inside of that, if you have a look at it, we talked about having our own names. There are hapu iwi who want to bring to life their names, but this was the start of that. So it wasn't a, we were being bold, but it wasn't an either or. It was like, we see this is the starting of that and that, and that, as you said, uti puti. And then it will actually help bring others. Well, we don't affiliate with Aotearoa and mō mātou kei o Tautahi. For us in Christchurch, we have this. That's cool. But it was actually to start something that we at least agree on, but not to replace mana whenua, kōrero narrative and words. So, yeah, I think that was it. And that's why we gave a date that wasn't like next month. It was a wider, exciting wānanga and discussion that we have as a nation. It's been really awesome.
I'm smiling because you just said the line that we can find something to agree on, and I'm just thinking of this current climate. Good fucking luck with that. Finding something to agree on. there'll be maybe something to agree on for most people, but there'll always be those outsiders as well.
Oh yeah, I think the thing is though, it's really important though in everything that we go through in our history, that we can find moments of time when we put this to the forefront and we discuss it and we decided now. And I think that's sort of what it is. These are some really interesting cultural dynamics, which almost get defined as race dynamics coming out of the house at the moment. So I think it's timely.
I wonder, and this is not meant to minimize the drive to make Aotearoa the official name, but I wonder if it feels a little bit maybe like, and I'm not comparing you guys, and I'm not saying this is disingenuous, but the Greens have this thing at the moment where they want quality, affordable housing as a human right. And when I talk to the Greens about it, they're like, well, that's the aspirational goal. Like, how can we get there? How long will it take to get there? What part of it can we get there? Is the reality of this that, within a year, 18 months, 2 years, the official name of New Zealand will be Aotearoa New Zealand? Like, is the outcome for this likely to be that it will incorporate Aotearoa as its own official name, as also a part of the anglicized English version of the name as well? And that's really the likely outcome to come from this?
Look, I think it will become Aotearoa, because everyone's starting to learn that actually New Zealand, other than wearing the name for a long, long time, has no significance for us. It's not connected to anything for us. It's not even from this end of the world, so it's not Pacific. So I actually think that we will go to look for things as we've been through what we've been through as a nation in this world of huge uncertainty. We'll go for what gives us certainty, which is identity. And so I think it will happen, because we're already at Aotearoa, New Zealand. That's the flow. And so we're pushing that actually, and it's not just about getting into the Commonwealth Games and Olympics as the first ones in the queue as going around, because that was another. I've been seeing some really cool. Sorry, but sorry, I might have just cut out then. But I think we're going for Aotearoa, because we need to push for change, not for status quo.
It is a very good point though about the Olympics and the Commonwealth Games, because all too often you have to wait halfway through all those other teams first of all. So I think that's a great selling point. I love that.
Yeah. Jumped on that one as fast as we saw it.
So where to from here then? Because it's not going to a public referendum necessarily, which is often a path that it would take, although as we know in New Zealand, those are non-binding. Does that therefore mean that Select Committee will go through the process and then Parliament will actually vote on whether this is the case or not? Because that's the normal process. Select Committee, citizens can put their submissions in, but then actually that means ultimately this will be decided in the House by the politicians.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, I need to And even we were excited until our team came back and said, "Whoa, what are we in, Debbie? Whoa, whoa," you know. And it's so like, oh, what? And so select committee will decide. So first of all, they it depends on what happens in the select committee,
Right.
and we can't be certain that they will even refer it to the House. And so we haven't really beyond that stage. And again, that may not come up until early next year, until after the summer break. But that's the process, that it goes to the select committee. They then get to discuss, and no doubt debate, whether they refer it to the House for Parliament to debate. But that's and that can take months and months. And I guess we're also really mindful there's a big occasion next year, the elections. So yeah, it is up to the politicians to see where their intents are. We're really authentic about wanting to make this change and push for this change, but it'll sit in the select committee, which nobody's on. Yeah,
so if this goes through select committee and if it then gets passed on to the House, without question, this will be an election issue for next year, because political parties will use it as a narrative one way or the other. You agree with that?
Yeah, sadly, I think culture has become a real, particularly tangata whenua culture, and the aspects of Māori wanting to advance and rebalance has become quite a kickball politically. And I guess the sadness about that is that the real discussion should be how we grow and advance as a united, very intentional partnered nation. And I guess we've already seen it. We've seen it in the House. This Act have really claimed the word co-governance, which is really cool. We prefer the word partnership.
Yeah.
And I think, it's the stage is already afire with that type of rhetoric. But beside it all, and we have seen it, we've seen it in the types of decisions we saw made in local government. There have been requests for young change, young Māori change, lots of Māori in roles of kawanatanga that we've never seen before. And I do think there's a large appetite for correcting what was wrong, but doing it with dignity.
Hey, Debbie, always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for coming on board to explain outboard as to what's going on from here. Believe it or not, next week is November. How crazy that feels. Busy in the House in the last couple of months of the year, or are you looking forward to an end of the year wrap up? What about you?
Yeah, we've got the next week's recess, 3 week block recess, then a 2 week block, and then we're out. And we're really, really looking forward to some good quality time with our whānau, because next year's going to be exciting as hell. Yeah. Like, it's just going to, I think we're one of the very few parties that have consistently polled. We're still within the margin of error of being an important player or not. But the reality is that we love, getting out and socialising and being able to pump up our policies and seeing the reaction of everyone. So it's going to be an awesome, fun year next year for us. I know about some others, but yeah.
If we don't talk to you again this year, we look forward to seeing you in Ōtepoti next year with, I'm sure, the road trips you guys will be doing.
You know it. Thank you. And look after yourself too if we don't see you before summer break.
Definitely. Debbie Ngawera Packer, co-leader of the Maori Party, Te Pāti Māori. Thanks for joining us today, mate. That was awesome.
Hey, kuna.
Alrighty, Mighty. I just thought I'd mention one quick thing here as well, and I'm sure this is really the only reason I know people join into this freaking evening show, isn't it? Is that we've been joined in the studio by a little someone. So there we go. Let's have a look at some of the messages. Right. So I'll do some of the messages now that are just come in about the conversation we've just had, and then I'll go back and do some about the Luxon National Party conversation from earlier. So there's a bunch of people here. A bunch of people are going to be mentioned twice because people have been commenting all the way through. Sai says, I would support the name change. Simon says, I personally prefer the status quo, New Zealand, Aotearoa unofficially. Mick says, couldn't care either way. To be fair, it's not going to change my life. I would say it's a waste of money since it's commonly used already, but whatever. Stephen says, I'd be happy with the change as a thoughtful gesture of bringing history and culture into focus when referencing the place. Gareth says, am all for the name change. Don't hate the existing one, but Aotearoa is better for a bunch of reasons. Roe pointed out the bit about the Commonwealth Games, the Olympics, which I think is really the main reason, isn't it? Really the main reason. Josie says, I will be willing to bet that during select committee, it'll get whittled down to Aotearoa, New Zealand. Ava says, New Zealand has a combination of vowels that sound particularly grating spoken in a New Zealand accent. Aotearoa is much more pleasing to the ear. Free Soul says, imagine tourists mangling the pronunciation of Aotearoa. I mean, I'm sure, Free Soul, you're not saying that as a reason not to do it, because, I mean, I don't think any country worries about, you know, what they call themselves for the sake of people visiting. And I think, Sai, there might be some more that have come in, but Sai wraps it up quite nicely to say, I'm a veteran. A name change is not going to change how we remember those who died for our freedom. Many countries will change their names over the years. It shouldn't be something to be feared. So I think it's quite a nice kind of summary of the whole thing. And while that was going on, I just started thinking about that. So I actually started to think about the idea of the countries that I could think of at the top of my dome that have changed their names. What did I write down? Burma to Myanmar, Rwanda to Zimbabwe. There was Yugoslavia, which is now, is it Croatia and Slovenia? I was thinking Serbia. Anyway, I'm not sure. And then, of course, the USSR becomes Russia as well. So, yeah, it's not like it's hasn't happened, and it's not like it should be feared. Personally, I think it will be Aotearoa New Zealand. I don't think any parliament's going to vote to get rid of New Zealand out of the title. Say that with the greatest of respect to what the Maori Party is trying to achieve. I think what's behind what they're trying to achieve is great. And as Stephen says, heaps of respect for Ngawera Packer. But I think that they won't get rid of the name New Zealand, in my opinion. It won't happen. So I think that what will happen, in my opinion, is that the name Aotearoa will be made an official name, but it won't replace New Zealand as an official name. I don't even know if Aotearoa New Zealand will become the official name. I just wonder if Aotearoa will be an official name and New Zealand will be an official name. Just like at the moment, Māori language is an official language, and English is an official language, and New Zealand Sign Language is an official language. So one doesn't replace the other, and they don't have to be connected to all be official, quote unquote official. So I think the likely scenario is that Aotearoa will be made an official name of New Zealand. Most people already are in kind of positions of prominence calling it Aotearoa New Zealand. As I said to Debbie here in Dunedin, half the time I say Dunedin and half the time I say Ōtepoti. And I think that I understand that, you know, Indigenous people of New Zealand are the minority. So on some level, as Debbie just hinted at, you have to kind of go through legislation rather than say, well, what do the people think? Because that's the problem with like sort of ruling by petition or mob rule, is that how do you protect minorities? How do you make sure minorities, whatever they are, they don't have to be race minorities, remember, just a smaller group of people, how do they get protected, and how does a country then do what's right for the smaller group? And if you always go by what the majority says, then smaller groups get left out, and that's not how a country should run, in my opinion. Yeah, so that's what I think about that whole thing. Let's have a look at some other comments that have come in, and they came in for the previous conversation around Christopher Luxon working at McDonald's. So these are referencing back that conversation. Gareth says, ideology, key comment on voting for Trump. Yeah, that came out with Robert Patman, didn't it? That Key admitted that because he votes for the right, he'd vote for Bolsonaro and he'd probably have voted for Trump, which I think is kind of terrifying. And that's that idea of, as we were saying earlier, not necessarily playing each ball on its merit, but always picking your side and sticking with them, even if they have an authoritarian nut bar like Donald Trump trying to run a country. More on that conversation from Josie. I think there is something to be said for commitment to intellectual rigor, good faith engagement, and honesty that is shared or eschewed by different groups. I think right-wingers really dropped the ball here. Sai says, Norway uses a system, and it has been a boon maybe that's boom, for the economy. It prevents the race to the bottom on contracts. On to Christopher Luxon. Another Simon says, Christopher Luxon, actually, I wonder if that's a spell, an accident or on purpose. Christopher Luxon worked in a McDonald's is like a person who now moves onto a higher paying job and then moves the ladder. Yeah, well, they say they pull up the ladder behind them. Free Soul says, this is one of the many reasons I dislike the right, anti-giving workers a fair go. So that's about the Luxon and the McDonald's conversation. Carl says the timing and optics of this publicity stunt was Judith Collins level silly. And I think that Carl is referencing where Judith Collins went to a church and sat down and had that photo of herself like this, praying in a church. I'm hoping that's what you're referencing, Carl. I should look it up because it was one of the funniest photos there has literally ever been. Now let's look it up. Judith Collins, Praying, praying. I'm sure it'll come up. Yep, there it is. Oh, look at that. It's fucking gold. It's absolutely gold. Look at that. How's that for a it's fantastic. That was utterly fantastic. You just could not write a better bad idea for a PR stunt. It's like when you teach when you're working with a kid on stage and you say, now the next scene you have to pray, so they all do this because that's what you're supposed to look like when you're praying. It's hilarious. Anyway, Carl goes on. Sorry, I got distracted there by wanting to have a bit of a giggle at a previous photo. Carl goes on to say, how did they not see this was going to make them look so out of touch? Ava says he's trying to do the John Key likable thing. This is talking about Luxon again, except he has the charisma of a boiled, I don't know what that is, a choker? I'm not sure what that is. Speaking of Cameron Slater, definitely a simp for National or nursing a serious red chip on the shoulder, hardly representing a commitment to the conservative principles or policies. It may sound nitpicky, but nuance is important. And since I've been reading those messages out, about another 50 messages have come in. So we just having a quick look to see if there's anything else before we move on to the next thing. You're wrong. English is an official language in New Zealand. English, Maori, New Zealand Sign Language. Oh, look, see, there you go. Politikiwi just pointed out my my foibles. Yugoslavia went to Serbia, Croatia, Macedonia, Bosnia, Slovenia, etc. There you go. So how little I knew. But the point being, yeah, Kuki said it as well. There, Nick said it, Rhodesia to Zimbabwe. Oh, there's another one here. Oh, Ceylon, yeah, to Sri Lanka. Good one. Yep, I think Aotearoa New Zealand will become an official name. I think Aotearoa will be official name, and I think New Zealand will stay an official name. That's just my thoughts. All right, good to see Nala pop down from upstairs. She's decided that she wants to join the party tonight. So there you go. She's in the house, and I'm sure that pleases most of you because I know it's the only reason half of you are here. Let's have a look now at the last story of the day. I talked about being hoisted by one's own petard. Being hoisted by one's own petard meaning, setting off a bomb that blows back in your face. So there was when I say fantastic, I'm being sarcastic, right? A fantastic question asked in the House, I think it was yesterday, by Mr. Luxon, looking to try and catch out the Labour Party and Grant Robertson to try and embarrass them by suggesting that their record was terrible. Listen to the question first. I'll play the question first, then I'll stop it and we'll reflect on the question. Have a listen to the question first. We'll have a listen to the question first and watch the the smile that Mr. Luxon has got on his face. It's like, to me personally, it's like when someone goes, I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you. I got a good one that's going to get you. So that's the vibe of the question. Have a listen first.
Comes to oral questions. Question number 1 and the name of Christopher Luxon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Acting Prime Minister and reads, does he stand by all of his government's statements and actions?
Does he stand by all his government's statements and actions? I'm sorry, I was trying to jump out of my head there with a big smile. And what he does is he gives Grant Robertson, I think it's about 2 minutes we're going to watch now, an opportunity to go, look at what Labour's done. This would be the definition of hoisted by one's own petard.
Taloha name, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Grant Robertson.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for the opportunity to mark 5 years of the government securing better outcomes for New Zealanders. In that time, we have added 10,000 more public homes, accompanied by record high building consents and putting an end to overseas speculators rorting the property market. We're better supporting primary care mental health services with 2.3 million people now covered through primary care providers. We've increased the number of nurses by nearly 20%, the number of doctors by over 20%. Mr. Luxon, we've lifted 66,000 children out of poverty, served more than 63 million school lunches. We've employed 5,200 people through Mana.
Now, this goes on. We'll let this keep going in the background. There will be people who disagree with us, obviously.
Apprenticeships
but
and trade training.
I think the point that I was making is what a ridiculous question to ask, and what were you expecting
and an economy
to
that
happen,
is
Mr. Luxon?
larger than pre-pandemic. We've also cushioned the effects of the global cost of living pressures by lowering petrol excise duty, introducing half-price public transport, and the support we've given to low and middle-income New Zealanders. Mr. Speaker, all of that shows why it's important to have a government who has a well-thought-through and costed plan, because the alternative of an uncosted, untested, and frankly dangerous set of proposals coming from the opposition, like UK-style tax cuts for the wealthiest New Zealanders, would take New Zealand backwards.
Why did the government scrap the target for shorter wait times in emergency departments?
Mr. Speaker, the previous government's record on targets was appalling, Mr.
Now, being fair, that should have been Mr. Luxon's first question, and being fair, Grant Robertson doesn't really answer the question. I mean, we've got to be fair. That was a much better question than the first one, but Grant Robertson, who is a bit of a master in the House, turns it pretty quickly. Although, if we're being fair and it was the other way around, you'd say, hang on, that wasn't the question. You didn't answer it. I think, though, what's happened here is because of that first question basically going, so tell us how good Labour is, and he did. That Mr. Luxon's kind of lost the battle here already, and he just struggles to get it back.
Speaker, because what they did was set targets across government that actually didn't take New Zealanders forward. In the health system, Mr. Speaker, I am extremely proud of a government that has increased health funding by 43.5% since 2017, has increased Farm Acts funding by 43% in that time, has extended free and low-cost doctors' visits to those under 14, Mr. Speaker. We've also covered 2.5 million people through mental health sessions, Mr. Speaker. We've continued to lift those in the workforce. We've continued to support all of those at the front line. But here's the rub, Mr. Speaker. The health system would have been under even more pressure if we'd followed the National Party's advice and opened the borders up. That's when the health system would really have felt the pressure.
So there you go. Then they go backwards and forwards for a bit more. It gets into the much of the muchness. But it was really interesting to see, in my opinion, sort of what Simon has said, right? That's my thoughts as well. An experience of Christopher Luxon, because it was an open-ended question that gave Grant Robertson the opportunity to basically go, look how great we are, look how great we are. Now, I'm not saying you have to agree with what Grant Robertson said, but that's what that question did, because the first question, he did actually answer. Because Christopher Luxon said, do you stand by the stuff that Labor said and done? And Christopher Luxon said, and then Grant Robertson said, yes, and here they are. So he did actually answer that question, which is why it was so bad. Second question was a much better question from Mr. Luxon, and Robertson didn't answer it. However, because sort of he was on the back foot so much from the first question, you know, if it was a tennis match, you'd say point Labor in that. Carl says something similar. That opening is terrible, and Luxon always starts that way. It's supposed to allow him leeway to try and catch the government off guard with supplementals, but Robbo and Ardern are just too experienced. And then Josie was pointing out the bit about the costing of their plans, because we haven't yet heard from National how they're going to pay for their things like tax cuts. Megatron says Grant is a master of the House, not on my team, but love his work. Yeah, I mean, look, great. I mean, when I say great, I'm like, this is what we like to do here. We go, what's fair is fair. You can't question how good he was being in the House and how skilled he is at that. Gareth, last one here. See, I apologize about the little delays there, but as you appreciate, there's only me tonight, so Nala is being a bitch. Literally, I mean, female dog, and not helping out at all. The thing about National's targets while in government was that they were mostly just that, with no solutions, telling people to make things happen doesn't make things magically happen. And we're kind of still seeing that this time around. Although, in fairness, you'd say that's the job of the opposition party. The job of the opposition party is not to actually say, because they're not in power, so they can only set targets as to what they're going to do. It's when you're in power that you have the ability to then do it. But yes, you do have to be costed, and they do have to be in place. But there you go. There's a little bit of the house for you. We're getting fully political tonight, aren't we? We certainly are. All right, let me say one quick thing before we go on, and that is operating the whole thing by myself. Operating the whole thing by myself. If you want to be a part of the team, we'd love to have you on board. The way you can do that, if you enjoy what we do and you want to support us, is to, look at me clicking all the wrong things because I'm operating the thing by myself, is to be a part of our Patreon team. If you want to be a part of our Patreon team, all you need to do is head to go to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. There's 6 levels of membership there. They all come with benefits, including some merch in there as well. $50 producer levels receive caps, $100 senior producer levels receive caps and t-shirts, and along the bottom of the screen is a couple of the thanks to our $50 patrons who I would need to contact if you guys are watching, because you guys have caps coming your way. Eehoo! And then also there's other bits and bobs that come along with it, like for example early there's the Ngawera Packer conversation that got put up early. It's now going to be available after the show on YouTube as well to everybody. But when I get a chance to have an early conversation, it goes on there first. So you get early access to some things, along with, of course, all the long form conversation as well. So there's a long form conversation we did last week with Lucy Thompson from Groundswell. That was 50 minutes of conversation, of which we used about 15 minutes in the actual live show. And then, of course, there's the infamous Chantel Baker conversation for 2.5 hours. Which again, we probably used about 20 minutes from in the actual conversation. So there's lots of content in there as well that is either early access or only available at Patreon. If you want to be on board, we'd love to have you. We are putting out there, we're going to try and get to 50 patrons by Christmas. We're about halfway there-ish. And if you'd like to be involved, patreon.com/Big Hairy News. If you're still watching Chewy, from Nick, woohoo, good on you, cuz. If you're still watching Chewy, we all wish you speedy recovery. If you're feeling up to it, you're welcome to join us tomorrow night. I don't know what we're doing yet. I'll put a few messages out there to a few people to come on and have a bit of a chat tomorrow night, but we will see what happens with that tomorrow night. So best wishes to Chewy getting better, and actually to anyone else who's under the weather at the moment. If you've got COVID, I would say actually that just as a reminder, I think we're still in a very good place with COVID in New Zealand, but the numbers have doubled since the mask mandate was retracted, cancelled, whatever the word is. So just be aware it's still out there. You know, I mean, to be honest, not to use him as an example to me, but Chewy was a bit of a wake-up call to me. There was a couple of moments I was starting to get a bit slack. I'm still masking when I'm going into areas that require masking, like when I flew up to Auckland on the plane, that sort of thing. They didn't require masking, but where I think the value was up. And when we hear back from Chewy and when we get the gist of how it's been, we'll have another first-hand account of how it is. So I would just encourage people to still take care of yourselves mostly. And if you don't care about yourself, then think about the people around you as well that you might want to take care of as well. You know, keep your household and the vulnerable around you also safe as you can. And to be honest with you, man, you know, I went to Pack and Save today and I had a mask on in Pack and Save. If it's just 20 minutes in a mask, and you know what, it's not the 99 times that you don't need it, it's the one time that you do. You don't wear a seatbelt in your car for the 999 times that you don't have an accident. You wear it for the one time that you do. You know, if you knew that you're coming into interaction with COVID tomorrow, 100% sure that you were going to be in a car, in an office, in a building with someone who had COVID, then you'd either not go or you'd wear a mask. But of course, you're not going to know that until 3 to 5 days later. Sorry, I'm off my soapbox. I'm just still encouraging people that it is still out there and people are still getting sick. And I would encourage you to look after yourselves and look after those around you. And I think that's a good note to move on. Should we go, Nala? Should we go upstairs? Yeah? No? Okay, I think it's a no. I think Nala's here for the night. She's wet. It's raining in Dunedin at the moment. Aotearoa Dunedin has been wet today. All right, guys, it's been a pleasure to be with you again tonight. We'll see you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. # share our shit. Let people know what's going on. It's another way that you can actually support us, is to tell people about us so we can continue to grow slowly but surely. And other than that, be safe through the next day. We'll catch you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. for another edition. Be well, my friends. See you tomorrow. Hooroo.